Okay, everybody. First off, I would like to welcome everybody to Christianity, Worldview, and Beliefs. Listen, we're really going to take our time and actually go through some real history, passages, timelines, historical accounts, and try to really give you guys a full understanding, at least to the best of my ability that God bless me with, to really understand a worldview of Christian beliefs. And they're going to be based on things that you can actually kind of look up for yourselves, actual Jewish history, Jewish thoughts, Christian theology, where they actually get these things, where the what texts actually inspired their doctrines, and where those things come from. So in a nutshell, that's what it really is. Everything that I say, I'm really going to try to make sure that it's source based, driven to the times of the primary sources that actually make up their beliefs. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is God, the nature of God, from a Jewish Christian perspective, how this actually, came about. Next, we're going to be talking about the fall, how the state of the world got to where it is now. What does that mean biblically? And we're not just going to go through Adam and Eve and all those things, but we're going to show you what those things actually meant, and also how the Jews and the Christians interpreted those things, mainly the Christians. I'm really going to try and bring it home to some relevance. 3, we're going to be talking about the prophesied Savior. This is God's act on this whole thing, that was said about. How there was a Savior that was going to be prophesied to actually turn the tide, and what this has to do between our stance before a holy God. The prophesied Savior has a lot to do with our stance before a holy God and why we need a Savior. Lastly, number 4, we're going to be getting into God and His eternal kingdom. This has to do with the end of all things, a little bit of eschatology, what's going to happen at the end of the ages, what what Christians and Jews and even some Muslims, have their thoughts about the end times, and what's going to happen. So those are the 4 pillars of things that we're going to be talking about. First off, it could be said that, in my personal belief, that God has 8 aspects to Him. One of those aspects, let's just start with all 8. First off, God is holy, perfect, just, all-powerful, all-knowing, eternal, sovereign, omnipresent. So let's play a game. I want you guys to try to remove one aspect of God and explain to me how He can still be God. Of course, there can't be any volunteers because you guys are listening for now, but I'll try to play both roles here. So first, let's look at holy. What would it be like if God was not holy? Would God be God if He was not holy? Most likely no. Holy basically means in the Hebrew to be set apart. It means to be sanctified. It's the word kadesh. In the Greek, we have the word hagios. That means morally blameless, without blame. You're completely holy. If God was not holy, then that would mean that somehow God would be, fallible to corruption. He would actually be able to be corrupted. And if God can be corrupted and be tainted, and we're already corrupted and tainted, then that once again kind of puts us and God on equal footing, when God is supposed to be what? Holy, set apart, different. If God was not holy, then really there would be no standard to measure what is right and what is wrong, what is holy and what is not holy. So, just kind of think about that. Number 2, perfect. God, of course, obviously, if God was not perfect, that would mean God is basically under the attack of error. He's within the guise of error. He's able to, make mistakes just like us. And if that's the case, if God is able to be fallible and make mistakes, and we're already making mistakes, then it's like, well, who do we look to have 100% assurance, of trust, of you basically know what I'm saying. If God was not perfect, he, would not be God. There has to be some type of absolute power out there. There has to be something very absolute in the universe. Just. This is the third one. If God was not just, would he still be God? Well, think of it like this. Here's this all-powerful being, and he has created all these laws and things, and what goes up must come down. There's fish that are in the sea and they're able to breathe underwater. Human beings, well, we can't do that. There's this balance, there's this justness to the entire universe. Certain actions that are right or wrong. There has to be a standard of justice to have a balance of things. But if God was not just in his actions, then that would mean that we could pretty much do whatever we want and get away with anything, and no one will be held accountable to anyone. If there is no standard of justness or justice to be to measured, then that would mean we would be able to just make up our own rules, and really a universe without any type of rules or laws, things would just break down. And so if we can't measure ourselves up against something that is completely just, completely holy, completely perfect, then how in the world will we be able to, keep things stable? There has to be some type of absolute rule or absolute justness to be able to measure ourselves. There has to be a standard for us to go by. All powerful. God could be all these things except for all powerful. What kind of God would that be if maybe God is able to be overpowered? What kind of God is that if he is not all powerful and in control? All knowing. This is very simple. Say that you pray to God, right? I kind of thought about this. Say that you pray to God and you say, Lord, I need to know what direction I need to take in my life. What should I do? God tells you something. And all of a sudden, you come back to God and you say, you know what? You told me to do this and it did not work at all. And can you imagine God saying, oh, well, you know what? I'm sorry. I, really didn't know it was going to end up like that. Hey, I was just giving you my best advice. We have friends for that can give us their best advice. So that would mean that, I guess, he only knows no more than we do. If he's not all knowing, if he doesn't know everything, if he doesn't know the future and all these other things, and that means that everything is still left up to chance. If God is not all knowing, then, there's no way he could be in control of, who lives and who dies, and he would not have time in his hands of control. When the stars fall, when the star is born, all these little things that we think, are pretty much not important, to God it is. Everything affects something else in this universe. Therefore, God has to know so that he can have control over the living, the dead, and the times, the ages of change. All these things come from knowing. Eternal. Once again, what if God was not eternal? He's holy, powerful, just, all powerful, all these things, but yet he can go at any moment. What kind of God is that? If God ends up leaving, well, what will happen to the rest of the universe? Usually gods are eternal. Sovereign. If God is not sovereign, if he does not have all authority, if he does not have the last word, then who does he answer to? Who does God answer to if he's not sovereign? I think I could just leave that area just like that. If God is not sovereign, then that means he has to answer to somebody. And usually the people that are sovereign are the people who made everything. He is the creator. We are his creation. And he is sovereign. He has a sovereign right over what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in his creation. And lastly, we have omnipresent. If God is not omnipresent, would he still be God? Well, think about it like this. It would mean that God is limited to a certain time or place, right? He's limited inside of his own creation. There may be some trouble somewhere far away, and God has to get there somehow, because he can't be everywhere to control everything. He can be as powerful as Superman, but guess what? Even Superman can't be everywhere. So, if God is not omnipresent, is he really God? And to be all powerful, but yet not omnipresent. If he's not omnipresent, is he all powerful? If he's not all powerful, then how is he all knowing? If he's not all knowing, then how can he be just in any of his decisions for us? Deciding who lives, who dies, who gets to be with him, and who is banished away forever. If God is not perfect, then how can he be holy? And if God is not eternal, then how can he be sovereign? Right? Because his sovereignty is limited to his mortality. Do you see how all these things go together? So this is a way to think about God. Now, I may be wrong on this personally, but this is just a way to think about, the aspects of God. And so these are 8 aspects that can give you some groundwork on the nature of God. So should any aspect be removed, God ceases to be God. And what you believe about God will determine your spiritual path. So for example, you have the traditional religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They believe in a personal God who has feelings, emotions. He can speak. He can interact with you. He has a conscience. Impersonal religions, I know one of them was a Baha'i religion over there. I think, they believe in personal God. That was my mistake symbolically. They believe that God is a force, an impersonal force, just like water or something. That's a lot of the Eastern religious thought. For us, God is personal. He's very similar to us because he made us similar to him. It says here that God describes himself by saying, Aye, Asher, Aye, I will be because I will be. So there's nothing partial about God. He is who he is. This is how he was describing himself to Moses. So if God is just, perfect, eternal, etc., then his actions will also be the same way, eternally. Lastly, what do Christians believe about God in terms of his essence? His essence is revealed in 3 persons, and that is the Trinity.